G'day nerds. Gonna be painting some... What's going on here? I don't know what's happening with that camera, so I'm just gonna fuck that one off, I think. Let's just hit turn off on that. I might come back later. But so today I'm trying to do I've had a friend that's asked me how I would approach a kind of light and night approach for models or armies. He's got a concept in mind, thinking of trying to do his army kind of like so. And it's a good start, like it's heading in the right direction, but not quite hitting the right approach. So he's just asked me like how I would go about it and asked me to take some photos of the process. So I figured instead of taking photos of the process, I may as well just record it and put it on YouTube. Let's see if this is going to work with my front camera again, or if it's going to start wigging out. Bit better, I think. Okay, but so I've got two models. The same model. One's over. Oh, it's still fucking freaking out. Alright, let's just turn this one off. You don't get to see me anymore. But so I've got two models, same model, and I'm going to try two different approaches on these ones. So one of them I'm going to do with more kind of like neutral greys and whites, and just putting color value in the spots where I think I'll need it, and then going through with contrast paints to get the kind of color that we're looking for. I'll talk more about the paint choices that I use when I get to them. And then the other one that I'm going to be doing is more of an actual coloured kind of transition, which is what my friend is doing. So I will be using that blacky grey as well for like the dark blue side. So that's kind of what we're looking at. So we're going to have two separate minis to paint, similar effects. To start with, I plan on doing this predominantly, I won't say all, I plan on doing this predominantly with just dry brushing, because I am on a time crunch here. I want to try and show what's the easiest way to replicate an effective scheme in a timely manner, right? If we wanted to, we could spend a week or two or more on one of these models trying to get it ready with this effect. We're trying to get this to an army ready level. So mostly dry brushing, just because for the most part, it's somewhat more efficient than airbrushing. And it's also kind of slightly more in line with the technique that we want to be using anyway, because if you're really good with an airbrush, you can be as selective as you like. If you're not very good with an airbrush, you're going to put paint in the wrong spots and it's going to kill your effect. So for this part, I am just putting down what is going to be my, because this is going to be the most predominant colour, this is kind of my working layer. I'm going to be putting down some of this black uniform grey, or black uniform base from AK's model paint range. And this is going to be kind of the base for a working layer for both models. So rather than dry brushing, I figured I may as well just airbrush this. The reason why I think airbrushing is a little bit slower than dry brushing, cleanup time. If I need to spend, like, obviously there's an economy of scale as well. If I'm spending 10 or 2 minutes, 10's a bit of an exaggeration. If I'm spending 2 minutes to clean an airbrush for each layer, that adds time. But if I'm just kind of going through with my dry brush, it's a bit more efficient. Why is this not mixing well? Come on. Come on, buddy. Just getting that all right in there, trying to mix it up to a sufficient standard. But yeah, so I'm printing out, I'll chuck descriptions for all the models. I got the files off my mini factory. I'll chuck them. Oh, come on, we're not working at all. Come on. There we go, that'll do. I'll chuck them up in the description when I put this one online. Cool models. Only problem I have is that like I scaled these models up and they're already quite fine, so I feel like the detail, this would be suited to like maybe this big, like I want this model in like a 75mm scale, so I'm probably going to reprint and do one of my own in a 75mm. The model is otherwise really nicely detailed, but I do just think it's kind of slightly, the detail's probably a little bit too fine for this scale of piggy. So I'd like to blow this up a little bit more and go at it from that way. But why is this not playing? See, this here is exactly why I think dry brushing is faster. You don't get all this bullshit. Anyway, it's a working layout. We're just gonna make it work. Alright. So this one, because this is my working layout, I don't really mind where it goes, how deep it goes, so long as it's somewhat consistent. So this is essentially my base coat, right? When I say working layer, that's what I mean. This is the primary color, because so what my friend was struggling with, I think, was the context of needing more midtones. So in glow effects, midtones are really, that contrast is what sells the effect, and I think he was struggling with that a bit. I have no idea what's going on with this airbrush at the moment. But I think that's what he was struggling with a touch, which is why it kind of just came out looking blue and looking yellow, which is what we want to try and avoid, right? So we want to be able to force contrast and force the eyes to look in a certain way where we can, and we're going to do that through contrast, which is, ironically, why I think contrast paints will work well, because then we're not needing to do it with multiple colors. We're skipping steps. We're doing it with just one color, which is like our neutral grays, right? So we're kind of just putting values where we expect them to be, and then we're going to go in afterwards with the contrast and kind of fix it and clean it all up then. So I'm just going to, I know what's wrong. My airbrush wasn't on. It's hard to airbrush without pressure. Okay, these are nearly ready to rock and roll. And you'd think it might just be because I haven't had a coffee, but like, it's 20 to 4, so I've been awake all day. Clearly my brain is not working. Alright, cool, but what are we going to do? We are going to paint. To start with, I think I might try with this light grey and the white kind of effect that I was talking about. So once again, I'm going in with this black uniform base. I have Russian dark brown, but I'm going with black uniform base. And then this is just silver grey because I'm running out of white. It's just a nice, light white, like a warm-ish white. I'm going to take some of this, take my dry brush. Let's get my dry brush ready to use. Okay. Now let's see. We want this one to be quite dark. Beautiful. And then I'm just going to with the dry brush. So this is why I like this technique, and why I think I'd prefer it if I was doing this as an army, because you are just aiming to control light, not also color, which means that you can smash it out a little bit faster, because this will all make sense as we get more through the model. At the moment it's going to look quite weird because it's like, okay, well, you're only painting like it in grey, what's going on there? But I promise it will make sense. It's almost kind of like a slap chop, right? Oh, too much white. Oh no. Just gonna have to get my Bob Ross on, I reckon. It's okay, it's a happy mistake. Taking some paint off. Okay, so now we want to be a little bit more selective, right? So we want to be thinking, where's that light coming from? So with my friend's models, he's doing it as light kind of from in front of them, like they're facing like a lampshade kind of thing, or like a street lamp. So this is now where I'm thinking about how this light is actually landing on this person, right? And then I'll show you the trick that I think will actually really help sell it. So he's kind of got it coming from like a, if I put it towards the camera, it's coming from like this way into the model for the light from the ground. Okay, kind of happy with that. I'll do that there. A little bit heavier down the bottom where we'd expect most of it to come from, up the corner. And then now the other direction, he's saying just like from the complete polar opposite spectrum, this is where the moonlight is coming from, or the darkness. So we want to kind of hit this along the back of, right, like so. Once again, adding a bit more lighter color. So actual like brush on model time for this model has been quite low so far, which is ideal because he wants to be smashing this out of an army. He doesn't particularly love painting, which means that we want lower barriers to entry, right? It's part of the reason why people don't do a lot of things. It's enthusiasm, barrier to entry, whatever it might be. So we are trying to keep it as simple as possible. Okay. And then now I reckon we can almost go with like close to just a straight of this one. Okay. And then this is like the brightest most parts, right? So I kind of want to be quite selective with this to try and sell the effect. And good thing to keep in mind, I don't love dry brushing as a technique, right? I don't often dry brush, I don't often use it. I just find that for the most part I'd rather be doing actual brush strokes. But like, that's come together in a matter of moments because this is essentially slap chopping with just a different mindset kind of going into the model, right? It's thinking more about where things are going to be rather than just even coverage, which is what slap chop kind of needs, right? So let's give the dry brush a quick wash out. you may or may not notice my dry brush is actually just a fucking makeup brush from Kmart. I have a set of Artist Opus. I don't use them because they're too nice, and like this brush just gets beaten and abused, and it still works. Like it cost me fucking $3. So yeah, that's kind of my mentality with brushes and dry brushes. They're workhorses. Buy the workhorses that work. Okay, so I'm not even gonna like clean out my brush overly pedantically. What I will do though is I will start with, on this one, I will start with the blue, I think. I'm gonna start with the shadow side. And I apologize for anyone that's kind of like, just do the contrast. You can jump forward in the video because I am dry brushing at the moment. I may as well continue dry brushing. And if you don't like it, I don't care. Okay, so at the moment, this is going to be a mix of black uniform base and French greyish blue. We want kind of because this side is for the darker component, I actually purposely want to try and make it less saturated, right? So this will start to make more sense when it comes through. And this is where I think that the downside of the contrast one, I can't really control that, right? As much as I can control it with this one. And part of the reason for that is because I'm a big believer that when we're painting things with shadows, we shouldn't just be painting them darker or washing them darker. What we should actually be doing, come on, pull focus, come on, there we go. What we should be doing, what we should be aiming for is desaturation and darkness, not just darkness, right? And I'll show you why. Because if I look at my hand here, right, quite bright, quite blown out, but a bit saturated. If I put that over the top, like a shadow, it doesn't actually just get darker, it gets desaturated, right? Like, it changes changes kind of the quality of the color to a degree. But the hard part with this is that we need to be a lot more careful with how and where we're actually putting things. Because we're doing it with color this time, we're not just applying, like, so where, once again, you'll see this trick, where I would like on this one want to apply a little bit of blue, I now need to be careful when I go in with my other colors that I don't actually go over it. And so where I say you want to be thinking more about value rather than specific color, right? So it's a little bit about how light works. The closer a light source and the larger a light source is, the more contrast there will be, right? So what contrast means is that it is the difference between our darkest parts, which is right in there, and what will eventually be our brightest parts, which is like up here and up here. Moonlight, even though it is quite far away, is still quite a large light source. So it reflects light, which means that because it's a large light source, the contrast won't be quite as high, which means that we will have like slightly more midtones and things like that. Just because of the size of the light. Whereas for something like a lantern, which is quite small comparative to the moon, right? That's the thing, you got to think about light as comparative. You will experience a thing called light fall off or light drop off. So essentially where the lantern, if we're imagining a lantern right here, the brightest part of it is actually going to be right on that boot, right there, and then it's going to get lighter as it goes beyond. It's like all documented in physics, right? There's things called inverse square law, like there's a whole bunch of shit out there for it. If you would like to learn more, I'd suggest looking at photography books. They explain it really well because photography uses it for the most part in terms of things like using flash photography. So yeah, there's really great resources out there from photographers for this kind of stuff. Now, I don't love that, but that's okay. Okay. Once again, giving my old El Cheapo a washout. And then we are going to build some layers like onions from Shrek. Donkey. Now this one I probably should get clean water for because I'm going to be using yellow. Ah, fuck it, it'll be fine. It's a test. Not everything needs to be perfect. Okay, this time I am going with rot brawn. I don't know if it's RAL, that number, and then rot brawn, but I don't know, whatever. It's a nice brown. It's like a chocolatey brown. And I'm starting with brown here, not red. And there is a reason for that. Because, once again, when we're talking about shadows and things, you want it to be slightly desaturated. So I could use like a black red, but I'm actually going to use more of a brown tone. And then, so, this is where one of the biggest mistakes I think my friend made, on one side of the model, he had only bright. But we've got this really big, like, billowy cloak or cape. So we actually have different tones through the same model. And even down here, you could even argue that, like, technically that portion down there could be a bit yellow. I'm going to leave it, but the argument could be made for it. So because we need to be aware of, like, the context of the color, right? The context of this color is that we have some form of lantern that's throwing light, and then light doesn't wrap everything. If you look at, so this light that I paint with on my desk, the one that's right above me up here, it will wrap everything, because if you look at my dusty toothless, the light falls over and it wraps around. That's because I've got a large light source. It's quite a diffuse light, all over. Like it shoots all over the model or what we're looking at. Whereas if you've got a really small light source, it doesn't have the power to project that light really wide, which is where you get more contrast that we were talking about. And contrast, once again, is that difference between your highest points and your lowest points. The wider that is, if I'm not mistaken, if the wider that is the wider your contrast. Okay. So it's starting to come together. Looks a bit weird because it's brown, right? But that's okay, it will make more sense. Then we're going to go with our next brown, which is kind of like a mid-orangey brown. This one's dark rust, one of my favorite colours. I need to buy more of it. And then the other hard thing, right, I've chosen volcanic yellow, which I'm not sure if this one's actually going to work or not, and I'll explain why in a moment. But let's just do step by step. So I do still want to kind of sell the effect, but I just don't want to put it everywhere. Okay. Now, Justin, why are you concerned that yellow won't work? Yellow is a really shit colour to work with because it's always really dilute, right? And then not only that, black has tinges of blue in it. So depending on where you actually dry brush or paint yellow, it may come out green. So have you noticed that if you just take yellow, it's probably just like, if I just take yellow and just put a strip there, see how it turns green? It doesn't actually look yellow. That's because I actually don't know why it happens, to be honest. I think it's the light bouncing through the pigment, so you can see, because it's so translucent, you get some of the actual light that's being reflected back, that's reflecting off of the black, if I'm not mistaken. But regardless, it is a shit colour to work with. I think I'm actually going to put a bit of sand in this to help with the effect. Because we want something that kind of reads as yellow, but doesn't have to be yellow. And that's really important. We need it to read as yellow. We don't need it to be yellow, we need it to read as yellow. And they are different things. So contextually, there's too much on this brush, I need this to be less. Yeah, see, I don't love this. I don't love this colour in general. I think I might actually try fixing this later, but that's kind of what I'm aiming for, right? I want less yellow. I think I know how to fix it. It's just disappointing that I have to do it, because it's essentially part of what I'm going to be doing on my next model. So, but anyway, this is the one that we've just done, right? So that's the moonlight side, slightly desaturated, and then we've got this side, slightly more saturated, looks kind of yellowish. Right, that's what we're aiming for. Let's do the one that we were working on before, and then put down for a moment the way that I think that you actually want to be doing this color scheme across multiple components or across multiple models, because I think that one, it's an easier effect to replicate, because it's an easier effect to replicate and an easier effect to replicate and execute, because you're not trying to push different colors hoping that you don't get it in this part here. Like, you're literally just going to be doing brush work after you've done your dry brushing of what's bright, what's not. So I am going to give it a wash, because I do want to put some depth back into it first, right? And this is going to be quite a heavy wash, which unfortunately I may need to just pause the video, because otherwise you guys are going to be sitting here literally watching paint dry with me. Where is my little magic medium? God, where is it? What was it? I swear I'm going brain dead. I can't find anything in my little box of paints anymore. Actually, I already got it out, didn't I? Thinned out my... This is what happens when you start losing your mind. There we go. Okay. Oh, where are we on? Come on, come back, focus. Let's just do that and that. Alright, so I have a little bit of Nuln oil with my kind of like my thinning medium, because what we actually want to do is we do want to push a bit of contrast back into the darkest parts, right? And so what this mix does is it kind of acts like a really watered down contrast paint. So it will put black back into the model, but it won't, I don't know why it's really struggling with focus today, sorry. It's probably struggling because I've got my settings fucked up somewhere, somehow. Put this back on manual, put this back on auto. There we go. So yeah, it kind of acts like a contrast paint. So puts it in the deepest parts, which is what we were talking about before, wanting more contrast without actually taking too much away from the effect that we're aiming for. So it makes it darker where we want it and keeps it lighter where we want it. Which is why this is a really good like kind of little cheat way to execute this effect. Okay. Let's just try drying this off. So now, as I said, the only thing that I'm actually quite genuinely concerned about with this this concept of effect, I'm actually really worried that my my shadow side is going to be a bit too saturated. So the good thing is though, there are ways around that. So I only have like a handful of contrast paints because I didn't get kind of entirely on board the hype train when they first came out. They're good, no doubt, as a specific tool. It's just not a tool that I use very often. So I don't have quite the diverse library that I probably would appreciate or enjoy. I've also tried like a couple of express colors that I haven't really loved. So I think for the most part I just prefer GW's shade range as opposed to actual contrasts. But I won't lie, they do have a purpose. Like they do have a position in painters' kits. They are quite versatile and useful things. So I'm going to try and mix a bit of contrast paint up here to see if we can maybe take a little bit of saturation out of this. So we've got a Callian green here, which once again we're not pulling focus on for whatever reason. Ta-da. A Callian green is actually blue. I don't give a shit what it's called, it is blue. Tell me that's green. Tell me that's fucking green. Tell me. But yeah, so I'm going to mix that with a little bit of like their apothecary white essentially. And a bit of that black the Nuln Oil that I had down. And then we're going to hope that that takes a bit of saturation out. Okay, and then we're just going to start applying this by brush. Like this is just regular brush work at this point. That is way too saturated. Dog. So shit. Okay. So you really want like a darker, less impactful blue than what I'm currently using. What about maybe like more like that? Is that going to be what we're after? It's kind of it. Yeah, honestly, probably even could just do this with like a fucking Drakenhof Nightshade, I reckon. I'm gonna try that. Probably would have been smarter. But, as I said, like I'm making this up on the fly as we go. I had a friend that asked how I'd do something, and this is how I feel like I'd approach it. So we're learning together at this point. Let's see what Drakenhof looks like is trying to sell this effect. Because that's like a nice dark navy blue. Yeah, I think I like Drakenhof like a lot more than... Let's try and see if we can reactivate the, just to get rid of it. Also, if you guys didn't know you could do this, you can reactivate paints and get rid of them, especially the contrast, speed paints, blah blah blah, because they're I'm just going to dry off my brush. Look, it's not perfect. I'd rather not have to have done that, but needs must when the devil drives. Just gonna like dry that off a bit more. Yeah, I like that a lot more. It's a lot more subtle, which is what we're aiming for. As we discussed, what should shadows be? Desaturated. They can still have colour, but it shouldn't be vibrant, punch you in the face colour. It should be muted, subtle, subdued. Your eyes shouldn't be drawn to shadows. Okie dokie. Cool. I'm happier with how that's turning out, and then we can go in again and do like another component on that afterwards, which I will show. Now here, I don't mind it being a bit more saturated. So for this component, I am actually going to, I think I'm going to mix a touch of red. Mix, or do it on the model. Nah, mix, because once again, we're going for simplicity and execution and consistency. Okay. So I'm going to get out a fair bit more yellow than I need here. Nasdre yellow is quite a nice one. I am hoping that this doesn't turn green because it's more of a, it's like a lot warmer of a yellow than a cool yellow. There we go. Alright, let's give this a crack. This top part probably shouldn't be quite as yellow. This would probably be more bluish, to be honest, if we're following our logic from before with shadows. But we're going to tie it all in. I'll show you how we tie it in with a bit of tricks. We do want to be somewhat efficient with this because we're going to try and like not wet blend, but a little bit of wet blending, right? So, for the slightly darker parts, rather than having them as just yellow, I actually want to push a little bit of red into it. So I'm going to make an orange. Because under here, darker. Under here, darker. Over this side, darker. Because the brightest parts, right, will be predominantly yellow. So where the light's going to catch the most will be the most yellow. And then where the light doesn't catch as much, it'll be a darker colour, really. And that's kind of as that's starting to roll around towards that side. Maybe have a little bit more red. Okay. Try and dry this off a little bit. You know what I actually think I want? I think I want like a blend of both. So because this one I'm not quite happy with how yellow it is, I want that more yellow. So I'm going to push some yellow nose drag into it. I'm getting some new ones just in case I tainted it with my red. It was looking a bit too orangey there. And just push that in. And see how on this one I've executed it better because the top of the bow isn't as bright. I was a little bit too heavy-handed with my other one. But we can fix that up. Okay. Yeah, I think the conclusion that we're coming to is that it doesn't really matter how you do it. What matters is that you do both. So I'm pushing some Drakenhof Nightshade into this one as well, just to bring it all together, make it look a little bit less dusty. And once again, bringing that contrast back in a little bit. Like dark parts should be dark, right? Okay. But that's a really punchy effect. This one I want a little bit more punchy. Have I got the right one? No, that's cool. For this one, I don't want. Okay. And then with this, I'm just kind of like doing like an overbrush. If you're not familiar with the concept of an overbrush, it's kind of like dry brushing. Kinda, but you just kind of, you're hitting the highest parts of something rather than like an actual layer worth of work. Just to be really selective with where we want a little bit more vibrancy or value. Just kind of making some bits a bit brighter. Okay. And then I think this, I actually want to hit the top of. Because I preferred how selective I was in the other one with the top of the crossbow. But the effect will still sell. And then I think, once again, the conclusion that we're coming to doesn't really matter how, but the technique is actually both. Both a bit of paint and a bit of contrast, a bit of dry brushing, a bit of everything. Because we are just going to push a bit of... And then you gotta remember, metallics reflect colour a lot, or light, reflect light a lot more strongly. So I'm assuming that this shoulder pad would be metallic. It's gonna get stronger highlights. This arrowhead, stronger highlight. Okay. But that's 45 minutes, 2 models, different techniques. Are they great? I don't particularly think so. But does the effect sell? I think the effect does sell. And that's what we're aiming for, right? It doesn't matter like how you do something, doesn't matter how well you execute it. You could execute something really poorly, but if you sell the effect, that's the aim. The execution isn't the aim, it's the outcome, which is selling the effect. And these both look like they're kind of in moonlight, if you ask me, and then against like some form of environmental lighting or lantern. I reckon I'm going to reprint this mini larger, and then I reckon I'm going to give it an actual shot to do this kind of scheme, because I like this a lot. But yeah, that's all. Thank you. Bye bye. Piss off.